Thank you. That was the most weak and lame cheer that I have heard today. There was one.
Also, it was from a coworker, so he's kind of like a plant in the audience.
Was it an employee in your team? Did they feel compelled to cheer for you?
Former intern.
Okay. Thanks for the warm welcome, except for that one person. We are going to help close out this event with what in the schedule was called a surprise, which was mostly a surprise for us. We didn't realize that we were going to a comedy talk, but you got to fill the time somehow, so here we are. So let's do this thing. So we thought that it was high time that someone discussed software architecture. And we thought that some very qualified people in the field should do that, but nobody volunteered. So instead, we have assumed the mantle of being super self-important. First of all, the most important thing to do in any presentation, especially by software consultants, is to tell you about ourselves.
So we're process methodologists.
We are also agile methodology activists.
Another thing we do a lot is Methodist activities.
And we care deeply about activity life cycles, of course.
But we also like to be healthy, so we're life cyclists.
And we use what's called cyclical reasoning.
And most important of all, we reason about processes.
Which takes us back to the beginning. We have a very important and full agenda today. This talk is all about making money. And was there another question? All right, so first of all, we need to define terms here. This is a very important field in software, so let's actually come onto the same page for what we're talking about. Let's talk about some definitions. I like to reach back into Latin when I define words in other languages because nobody knows enough Latin to call me on it. So if we break down the word architecture into its component points, we start with arc, which is of course a curved line or the narrative of a story.
Then we have hit, which is success or to strike.
Not in the French sense to strike,
Yeah,
but
the other
to
one.
actually punch somebody. Etc. Of course, another sort of Latin within Latin, meaning to go on and on and on.
And the most important part, it's about you.
So if we put this all together, of course, we have your narrative. Actually, I don't even remember.
Your successful narrative that goes on and on and on and on.
I don't know if you've had a conversation about software architecture recently, but that's my main memory of every conversation about architecture. It just never stops.
There was another more archaic term for architecture. It was architecture. So it's about listening to someone go on and on and on about their application architecture. But there's a modern pronunciation, and it's Reddit.
All right, so now let's define what we mean by software architecture. So we have a quote that we came across that we think was very pertinent. It's a set of words, phrases, paragraphs, and most importantly, acronyms, specifically articulated to bore the listener into thinking you know what you're talking about. Now, we reached into software history for this, for some of the main architects and founders of computer science, and this was actually a quote from Alan Turing as paraphrased earlier by Ada Lovelace.
So some famous architects in history, you've heard of Archimedes, a famous Greek mathematician, but he was also the first one to invent design patterns.
After that, of course, came Joan of Arc, the patron saint of religious conversion and tedious conversations.
And actually she was so tedious that her coworkers burned her at the stake.
That is, of course, very high-stakes software developments. And then finally, we have Ronald McDonald, famous in America for the Golden Arches, and architect of what we refer to as AHD, the American Healthy Diet.
But it's not just about people, it's also about architecturologies. It's the vocabulary of architecture. So first, you have the arch nemesis. So it's someone who wants to use a different architecture than yours.
evil. We have Archangel, which is an investor or VC investing in a firm whose sole product is application architecture white papers.
Then we have archery. It's a pointed discussion between two architects.
Archaeology, of course, is the science of architecture.
And finally, the archbishop. It's the senior architect and is responsible for resolving the religious discussions like archery.
There were, of course, many famous architectures in history. Let's discuss some of those now. There is, of course, the Arc de Triomphe. This is a monument erected to the glory of all software architects everywhere.
But then the salespeople got jealous, so they built the Grande Arche de la Défense, and it's to the glory of the consultants who build the clients for architecture recommendations.
And then finally, we have the Gateway Arch in St. Louis, which we put on the slide because we thought it was pretty.
All right, so now we're going to look at common terms that are used to define architecture. We spent years researching the field, and we came up with 4 terms that can be used to define any architecture. So first we have the model, then the view, then the controller, the intent, and the presenter.
There might be an off by 1 error in there.
No, that's 4.
Okay. All right. So I think these are all obvious, but let's just go over the actual definitions of these terms. Model, of course, refers to an actor.
The view refers to the perspective that you have on the problem.
Controller is, of course, the thing that you have that comes with your PS5 that allows you to play the games.
Intent, it can be a sleeping bag or any other item that you can find in a tent when you're camping.
And then finally, the presenter is us.
So based on those terms, we can look at common patterns and their definitions.
So we'll start with MVC, a very common term. This means actor, perspective, and a PS5 controller for controlling the camera in a game or virtual reality or, what's the term, metaverse? Yeah.
Then we have MVP, so actor, camera, and us. So why are we on the slide? What are we doing?
What are we doing on the slide? We're defining terms.
Ah, okay.
Oh, what are we doing in the definition? I don't know. Just go on. MVVM is, of course, an actor, perspective, and a perspective actor. It's very zen. It's also slightly confusing.
MVI, actors, perspective, sleeping bags. So the role of a sleeping actor in a tent?
Also a little confusing. Okay, so we tried to make sense of these because the previous slide didn't actually make sense to probably anybody here. So let's define these patterns in a better way. Let's not use those underlying definitions, but let's come up with better definitions that make the acronyms make sense. It's more important to keep the original acronyms than it is to define new terms with new acronyms because that's just going to confuse everybody, right? So first of all, we have MVC. Which can mean many things, such as maybe very consciously, which is the intent to solve a problem seriously, perhaps.
It can also mean make vegetables comestible. So we think this is really hard to do, but it's eco-friendly.
We can make virtual content, which is, again, another call out to the metaverse, which is very important to some very specific companies right now.
And specifically for our French audience, it can be mon ver chien. So Chet came up with that one. I'm not sure he knows how to use Google Translate.
My green dog is what I was looking for. So I think it works. Yep. MVP is a pretty important term, of course. So first, most obvious one is the most valuable player, the hero on a software team, the person who always gets the most popular monthly employee, that kind of person. They've got the dedicated parking spot outside.
Make vegetables palatable. Again, we want to be eco-friendly, but again, we're not sure that's doable. It's borderline sci-fi at that point.
Here's a sort of modern, very trendy definition of both governments as well as companies right now is mandated vaccination policies.
Yeah, it creates a lot of archery.
They do have pointed discussions. And then finally,
I'm not sure what you thought that meant.
I don't know, but I think the meaning is spoiled. All right. Moving on to MVVM.
So it could be Latin for mini, veni, vidi, mici, which means little, I came, I saw, and mici is not correct Latin, but it makes us sound smart, so we'll stick with it.
Marketing, very, very much. This is for people who like to use phrases such as, I'm so excited about these architectures, or we can't wait to see what you can create with our patterns.
And we don't want to be biased against numbers. So if you look at MVVM as Roman numerals, it's the date 1990. That's when the hypertext was first invented, which is very important because it's foundational for discussions on the internet about design patterns, so we can disagree with each other.
I'm pretty sure the internet exists only for disagreeing about software architectures. That seems to be a lot of what happens.
That's definitely what Reddit is for.
And then finally, mon verre vert manque, my lost green glass.
It's a very popular with architects at the bar.
And so the fourth pattern, of course, is MVI, make very intellectual. Obfuscation through complication, or OTC, is another way of referring to this.
It could also mean moving vehicles incoming. So this has nothing to do with design patterns, but when you cross the street, please look both ways for your safety.
Again, dipping into Roman numerals, we have 1006. It turns out that nothing much happened. I think some people were born, some people died. This is a really good representative for sort of a no-op software pattern.
And of course, for French architects, mon vert imperméable.
My green trench coat. Yep. I think it's clear. All right, so did that make sense to you? It didn't actually make sense to us either. We have now taken several runs at this, and we haven't really come up with a good way of understanding what the current common patterns are that people are using, which I think means that everybody is wrong. And so what we've done with that information is we've come up with some of the new patterns that we like to use and build to clients. So let us start with regular expression, MVVM. So this is defined in various ways.
So for instance, it's a model view model. It's actors seeing themselves in the mirror, and it relies on reflection.
There's a variation on this pattern called the model view model, which uses both reflection as well as recursion.
That one is very useful during hiring interviews. So then we have model, 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 model. Turns out that when you discuss architecture, we really don't care about the UI. That's for the UI engineers. Who cares? They don't know what they're doing. So we're just going to focus on the data.
After that, of course, we have the model, 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 view, model, view, model, view, model, view, model, view, model, view, model. I think that's obvious.
And finally, an example of what you cannot do. So model view is illegal because it doesn't end in model.
The M is so important. Always end your pattern in M. So the next pattern, of course, is the M.
You missed one.
M, which is pronounced mm. This is a yummy software architecture.
But we can turn this around and come up with the www, which stands for widgets, widgets, which is the opposite of the model, and that's when only the UI engineers design the architecture. So we don't need data. Who cares about that?
It's all about what it looks like. I agree. So another pattern we came up with is very useful is P, which is actually spelled like this. It's a natural process. And then based on the P process, I came up with this myself. This is the caca process. Caca, of course, is French for chocolate.
Your French sucks. That's not what it means. I'll show you later.
That's embarrassing. Okay, and then finally, we have the AQ process, which means, are there any questions? Thank you. I think all of that it was obvious, but if anything is mysterious in your mind, please feel free to ask. Yes.
Yes, thanks a lot for a very, very interesting talk. I had a question like, do you have any tips or best practices if you want to move from one architecture design pattern to another? Like for instance, if you want to move from the to the Kaka pattern.
The first step is to use what we call, it's a technical term, different letters. The acronyms are always the most important part with any pattern, so you need to figure out what letters need to be in the new pattern and use those letters instead.
And you can, of course, come to us and give us a lot of money, and we will help you do that.
Yes.
Does it run on the blockchain?
I'm laughing because, of course, I've been trying to sell this developer my NFT for weeks now, and for some reason, he simply won't buy into it. I think I just need to keep increasing the price. I think that's the way the market works. Right. Must be obvious to everyone here.
Maybe I have one question. So
Yes,
does
please.
the M architecture has been invented by Mr. Ronald McDonald? There is like
I think the architecture invented by McDonald's was yuck.
But also the Golden Arches architecture, that was the predecessor of the architecture, because that one only had one M, right? Huge, huge change when we added 14 more. Yep. Hi.
Hi. Can you talk us through the Kaka process? I'm not sure I'm very familiar with that one.
So first, you have to go to the bathroom.
Okay.
Well, second step, and that's one the very important one, you have to lock the door.
Yeah.
And then for the rest, you'll have to come to us, and we'll, pay us a lot of money. We'll guide you through the rest of the process.
Of course. Yeah.
Him. Go to him.
No, you need to see what it means.
Chocolate. I'm telling you, it's chocolate. Yes. Hi.
Hi. Could I assume that green is the color of the architecture? Because mon vert chien, mon vert imperméable. Could I assume that he's green-ish?
No,
everywhere?
I think you should assume that Chet is really bad at French.
Also, green is my favorite color. Green is, it turns out, the color of money. So, a dog that happens to be green, probably made of money. I think that's the way it works. Pate made of pate that's green. Don't
Eat that.
No.
Talking about green, is there something, do you have other, over here?
God?
Front row. Just lower, here, again.
Oh, yes.
Me again.
Hello.
Talking about green, are there any future proposal for vegetable-based architecture patterns?
He found the link between green and vegetables that we didn't even know was there.
Like, basically, MVI would be make vegetable ingestible, or is it like too far-fetched?
Do you have a CV?
I do.
Come see us after the talk.
Chet, I think he should be the next surprise at Makers 2023.
Yes.
Right here.
Hi.
In our company, we tried the variant, which is.
I haven't heard of that one.
Which is.
What was it? There was only 5 M's.
Yeah, it's the other variant of, but it's multi-platform. So what? What are your thoughts about it?
Well, we did try a variant of the M architecture, which had far fewer M's, and the result was more one that was kind of meh. So that one didn't really work for us. I would be surprised if it worked for you. Multi-platform sounds exciting, but the fact that there aren't enough M's in there obviously means it's not that exciting. Yeah, hi.
Hi, thank you. Just a very important question for everything here, I think. Who can win the M goodies, finally?
The M?
The big M as a goodies.
Oh, that big M?
Yeah.
Can we give it away? Eyal?
What? Does that answer that question? Okay. Yep. It's yet another work invention. There are a lot of them in the world, and now Makers has turned into one as well. Yep. Yes. Hi.
I'm trying to build a UI toolkit, and I was thinking of a way to implement a design system easy to use. Do you have an idea of architecture for UI toolkit to do so?
Well, we had one on the slides.
Yeah,
That's this one,
whoa.
the www.
The trick to any UI toolkit is to just keep adding widgets. Don't fix the problems with the ones that you have, or the architecture, or the performance, or the programmability, or the functionality. Just keep adding widgets. Keep adding widgets. Keep adding widgets. Just keep going, and then it won't matter, because you can always tell your users, you know, there's more coming, and then you just keep adding widgets. We have a triple checkbox now. How about a quadruple checkbox? What about a progress bar that goes in a circle? What about one that goes in a Mobius strip, right? And they won't know what's coming next. They just won't need it, right? It's the most important thing. Yes. Oh, hey.
Yeah.
What? Yes.
If we can make a lot of money with a pattern with only design, why do we care so much about data?
I think that's an excellent point. I don't care about data. In fact, I don't even care about design. I only care about the money part. So, money. I like it. Yeah, it's a good idea. Thanks.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
Which one is less used so I can make more money selling it?
Well, nobody has adopted Kaka yet.
Again, we have to talk about this.
What were you going to?
I was going to say that it doesn't matter. What matters is that you disagree with everybody else.
Yeah, and my understanding too is you can make more money and get more credibility by disagreeing, right? It's really about coming out with a very strong opinion that is opposed to everybody else, that builds the credibility that you need with the community. They understand, oh, here's a person with really strong opinions. They must be right.
I disagree.
So in one of the archery discussions I've had recently, someone brought up the point that if you write a lot of code that never gets run, it will never contain bugs. Is that a point that you agree with, or is that something that brings to the Kaka architecture?
Well, what's even better is that if you keep talking about the architecture, you don't even need to write the code that will never run and still get paid.
Yeah, not running the code is a good first step, but a good 0th step, we talk in terms of zeros for software people because we start with 0 and the rest of the world thought that was a dumb idea. The 0th step is to not write the code to begin with, right? The code that doesn't get written is the code that has 0 bugs. Right? Hi.
Hi. As a junior engineer, do I need to understand regular expression to eat vegetables?
We know that, especially in France, from my experience here, vast experience over the last 5 days, you're never going to eat vegetables anyway. So you need to understand regular expressions to understand the patterns, but it has nothing to do with vegetables. Vegetables are, I think in America we call them garnish. It's the little green thing that sits on the side of your plate that looks nice, that you push off the plate to make room for more meat. Let's take maybe one more, or zero, because we're software people. Oh, there is one more. Here we go.
If this is the vegetarian architecture, is there a pescatarian version?
That sounds very fishy.
And with that final pun, we will end this talk. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks.
And stay tuned. They're going to close this session out very quickly, starting now. Thank you.